Hi, I'm Dan Costa, editor-in-chief of PCMag.com, here with a special CES 2018 edition of Fast Forward, where we have conversations about living in the future. I'm here with the CEO of Indiegogo, David Mandelbrot. We're going to talk about crowd financing, we're going to talk about new products, we're going to talk about the cool products I've seen at the show, cool products you've seen at the show, and how campaigns like that Indiegogo creates are really an essential vehicle for bringing products to market these days. Let's talk about Indiegogo. It's been almost 10 years since Indiegogo launched and really created this field of crowdfunding. There were some efforts before that, but this is the one that first really meant mainstream. 10 years later, how's the business changed? How's the process changed?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, Indiegogo is really proud to be the first major crowdfunding company, and it's actually an interesting story. When it was founded, the founders were really interested in launching what is now called equity crowdfunding. They wanted to create the ability for people to actually invest in companies, but they didn't know that much about the securities laws, so they started down that path, realized that they couldn't do that at the time, and then they decided to experiment with perk-based crowdfunding. And Indiegogo was the first big perk-based crowdfunding platform, and yeah, we launched roughly 10 years ago, and it's basically taken off since. It's changed in a lot of ways. First and foremost, when we launched, it was perk-based crowdfunding was all that you could do on Indiegogo. Since we launched, we launched a product called In Demand. So after you run a crowdfunding campaign, you can continue to raise money after that. We've since launched Marketplace, where you can actually sell products once you have shipping products. And then a year ago, we actually, because the securities laws changed, we actually launched equity crowdfunding, and people and companies can actually raise funds on Indiegogo as investment dollars.
I mean, the equity question aside, I think it's interesting that there are a lot of users who, if you give them a great idea, you say, I want to do this, and I need to raise money to do it, it's amazing to me how many people will put that money in knowing that they may not get that money back out, and they may not get that service back out, but they're willing to place the bet if they think it's a good cause and a good product and a good mission. What is it that makes, people so willing to put that money down?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we've talked a lot with the backers. It's a combination of factors. One is that the backers just want that project to come alive. They see something that inspires them, and they feel like if I don't contribute to this thing might not happen. Campaign might not raise as much money as it needs, or the entrepreneur behind that project will get sort of dejected, so they do it, just to make it happen. A lot of times they do it because they may know the founder or somebody that's connected to it, and they want to help. One of the best ways to get your campaign going if you're an entrepreneur launching something is to start with your friends and family and get them behind the campaign. And then a lot of times they do it because they just want to get it early. They either want to get it early or they want to get it at a cheaper price. Many of the entrepreneurs on Indiegogo will offer their product at a lower price in their campaign than they'll ultimately offer it at retail.
I think it's interesting because there are some projects on Indiegogo, they're clearly personal projects, a little whimsical, anything can go on the service. But the thing that's more interesting to me is that how many real legitimate products get started on Indiegogo to build up enthusiasm, to build up, to establish the market for a product, to get feedback from users. It's really become kind of an important part of the product development cycle. Can you talk a little bit about how it's almost been professionalized in a lot of ways? Yeah,
absolutely. It's becoming, for a lot of companies, especially early stage companies that are developing hardware, it's become the way to launch your product and reach your audience. You start with running a crowdfunding campaign, and there's some people believe that, you run the crowdfunding campaign and you raise all the money you need. But actually, what more often happens with the really successful products is that they'll raise money on Indiegogo, and then venture capitalists will see the success of that product on Indiegogo. They'll see that there's already a market for that product, and then they'll come in with a larger investment even after the campaign is over.
So do you have any examples of products like that have started small and then gotten venture capital to really help them?
Oh, sure, many. So Misfit was there was a company called Misfit. They're still a company actually. They made a wearable device. They launched it on Indiegogo. It was very successful. They raised in the millions of dollars.
They were one of the first trackers on the market. Very low cost.
Exactly.
And but worked.
But worked, and they sold. I can't remember the exact number. I think they sold 8,000 units for a product that they weren't going to ship until months months later. After that, they were, because of the success of their crowdfunding campaign, they were able to raise venture capital money. Not only were they able to raise venture capital money, they also, because of the success of their crowdfunding campaign, they had retailers like Apple and Best Buy coming to them to see if they could get their product for their stores, because they knew there would be a market for that for their product. And then ultimately, they sold the entire company to Fossil, one of the largest manufacturers of watches in the world, for a total purchase price that was in the hundreds of millions of dollars.
So that's a pretty good success story for a small startup with no product when they come out on Indiegogo. Are there any products that you wish that Indiegogo hadn't supported, that were just flops, that bad ideas from the get-go?
You know, it's a good question. Not really. You know, what we love about Indiegogo is the way that it lets the public decide what's a really interesting product. So if it flops, in a way, it's kind of a success for everybody, because then the entrepreneur is not going to waste their time developing that product. So even when they come on our platform and there's not in theory they seem really interesting, but there's not a lot of demand, let's say, for that product, we still see it as a success, because the entrepreneur was able to learn early that there wasn't a market for their product and maybe not invest more resources into something that wouldn't ultimately be successful.
What is your user profile like? Are there users that are just interested in one particular campaign, they sponsor that campaign and then they come back a year later? Or is there a certain type of person that places a lot of these bets and likes doing it because they like the process?
Yep, we're at the point where, you know, it's basically 50-50 between new people that are coming for the first time and they're getting excited by a single project and they're buying into that project, or backing that project, I should say, and about 50% that are repeat contributors. But among those, about 20% of them, or 10% overall, are these sort of serial backers that will come back over and over. We've spent a lot of time with those backers. They're just really excited to help these entrepreneurs in their journey, and because they've participated so many times, they're well aware of the risks associated, but they want to get in and try to really be helpful to let those entrepreneurs' ideas come to life.
So we get a lot of pitches for Indiegogo projects by PCMag. It's amazing how many.
Do you mean from us or from the entrepreneurs?
From the entrepreneurs themselves.
Yeah.
Like it's and I can't tell you how many times I've like totally bit on a pitch, and then gotten to the end of the pitch and go, oh, it's Indiegogo, so I can't necessarily get it right now, but I have to bookmark it, so I'll circle back when it actually gets covered. But we always tell people, like, just keep in mind, when companies are trying to build hardware, if they've never built hardware before, it's really hard. Yeah. And there's a lot of things that can go wrong. Is there anything that backers should be mindful of when they're evaluating these pitches?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, there's sort of two parts to it. First, from the entrepreneur side, you're right, it is really hard. And what we learned from seeing the struggles that our entrepreneurs were having was that, you know, the entrepreneurs would go into the projects with really good intentions, but then they would start to run into challenges, often just based on a lack of experience, you know, in that industry. So we then formed partnerships with companies like Arrow Electronics, which is the largest distributor of electrical components, to help entrepreneurs figure out what parts they need in their bill of materials, to help them make sure that none of the parts are reaching the end of their life, so that they don't have to re-architect the product after they've already gone into production. And also with Ingram Micro to help with distribution, which becomes a challenge once you've manufactured the products. So on the one hand, we're trying to really help entrepreneurs to make it easier for them to get their products all the way to market. For backers, if there's anything that backers can really look at to try to gauge the likelihood that the project will ultimately be fulfilled, the best thing that the backers can look at is the experience of the entrepreneurs behind the campaign. The most successful entrepreneurs are coming not just with an idea, but really an idea and the experience necessary to make that idea come to life.
And so it's interesting to see how Indiegogo seems like it's evolved to become more of a business support network for the entrepreneurs, where if they necessarily don't have the supply chain experience, you can help them with that. You can help them with some of the marketing, and now you've launched Marketplace, and you're actually helping them sell their products from the site.
Yeah, and it's been really nice with Marketplace. Essentially what's happened with Indiegogo is as we've matured, and we're a 10-year-old company now, at the same time our entrepreneurs have matured, and so that what they've needed has sort of progressed along. So, what really happened was, we had this, we had Indiegogo, and when I first joined Indiegogo about 4.5 years ago, all you could do on Indiegogo was run a crowdfunding campaign, and that campaign only lasted for 2 months. And then the entrepreneurs came to us and they said, we ran our campaign and we raised all this money and we've got all this excitement for our product, and now there's nothing we can do on Indiegogo anymore. We have to go somewhere else. So then we launched this product called In Demand, which allowed entrepreneurs to continue to raise money after their initial campaign was over. Now, a lot of those companies have product that's actually shipping, and they said, we've tried other alternatives, but if we put it on Amazon, we just get buried in the millions of products on Amazon, and if we and in other places, they don't have the audience that you have. So is there a way that we can just sell now the products that are ready to ship on Indiegogo? And out of the entrepreneur desire for a product like that, we launched Marketplace. We first launched in beta a little bit over a year ago, and we've taken it out of beta in the last quarter, and it's been a huge success for us, and the entrepreneurs just love it.
Is there a certain type of product that sells really well on Marketplace? I saw there was a pretty awesome keychain that it just seems like I've got to have it. It's an impulse buy.
Yeah, it's funny, Dan, you hit the nail on the head. The impulse buys actually do really well. They tend to be products that are very low, that are low price, less than $100, but do something innovative and useful that people think, yeah, that's something that I'd like to get. And to touch on your earlier point, when they're in Marketplace, they're guaranteed that the product will ship. So they're not taking any risk, and they know that they'll get it within a very reasonable period of time.
And it fits within that. It becomes like buying it anywhere else.
Right. It's just like buying it in any other online or offline store.
Are there particular products that have, I wouldn't say failure rates, but really high failure to ship rates? Are software projects or complicated hardware projects?
It's a good question. Usually the issue isn't failure to ship. Those do happen occasionally. What's much more likely to happen is a delay in shipment, that it just takes longer than the entrepreneur expects to fully develop and ship that product. So I think it's good for backers in their mind, even though the entrepreneur has estimated a ship date, to actually recognize that there's a more it's actually likely, let's say, that it will ship a little bit later than the expected ship date if it's not in the Marketplace. And that's actually much, much more prevalent than products that ultimately don't ship.
So I don't know when you got into CES. I've been here for 3 days. I've already seen dozens of companies that are Indiegogo. They're trying to raise money on Indiegogo, and they have prototypes or what have you. Is there anything you've seen that's been particularly impressive?
I just got here yesterday, and I've been spending a lot of time with the entrepreneurs on Indiegogo. Some of the most exciting things that I've seen is we've got AO is one of the entrepreneurs on Indiegogo. They've created a device that you wear that could help people that are here actually at CES, that enables you to that emits a blue light to help get your body's rhythms back on track if you're suffering from jet lag. Travis Translator is here. That's been it was a hugely successful product in Indiegogo. It's a really fun one. It's a product where you pick your language and you talk into the product in one language, and it responds in whichever language you've chosen, and it's very good for translating for people between different from different countries, Yeah, and then as we talked about earlier, Jimmy is one of our campaign owners or entrepreneurs from China. They've developed a great television that's a projection television that can project from as close as 4 inches from the wall, and there have been many more. In fact, also today I saw from a campaign owner that's about to launch a really good VR set of gloves actually, that makes your gameplay in a VR world feel much more realistic with the movement that you're doing with your hands.
Very cool. I want to ask you some of the questions I ask everybody that I have on the show. Is there a particular technological trend that worries you, that concerns you, that keeps you up at night?
Yeah, if there is a trend, I guess that you could call it, that concerns me, it's the way that the technology is working its way into our children's lives at a much earlier stage. I know that some of Apple's investors talked about this recently, and it's not to say that there isn't a place for technology, but what we've seen and what all the studies have shown is that kids do have challenges in moderating the technology, and so that's the trend that most concerns me, in particular in education. It feels like there's a big movement to bring more technology into education, but as of yet, I haven't seen great data that suggests that the technology is truly enhancing the educational experience or giving children a better education. It's not to say that it doesn't exist, but I do think that when it comes to our kids and technology, it is worthwhile to be especially careful.
And there's not a lot of research that goes back. This is the first generation that's grown up with the iPhone. And we've had people on the show, guests on the show, talk about iGen and the consequences of having that constant social contact. When we were growing up, you had to call your friends on the phone, and you couldn't stay on the phone all night long. And the new generation of adolescents are in constant contact with not just their friends, but everyone in their school 24 hours a day. Yeah. And they can't get to sleep. Yeah.
What's interesting is the way that and I have a daughter who's 13 and a son who's 16. One of the things that's interesting is the way you describe it is true. In a way, they're in constant contact, but it's not in physical proximity. And just like was written in that iGen book, I do think they're missing some of the regular sort of face-to-face social interactions like you and I are having right now that I think are really important at the early stage in these children's lives. So if there's any trend that is concerning to me, it's the prevalence of the technology at earlier and earlier stages of the lives of our children.
Is there a technology or gadget that you use every day that just inspires wonder?
That I use every day that inspires wonder? That's a good question. If I can extend it a little bit to my extended family, my father has diabetes, and as a result of his diabetes, he is significantly visually impaired now. And I will say that I installed an Echo in his house, and it has been absolutely life-changing for him. His ability to get information. He also never used a computer, so his ability to get information on demand, to be able to call an Uber if he needs it, to be able to, honestly, in his case, just to be able to tell him the time has been extraordinarily valuable.
That's great. Yeah, I think sometimes we shortchange the enabling aspects of these really basic technologies. When you're deprived of a sense or two, these things can make a huge difference in your life.
Yeah, absolutely, and it definitely has in his. He says he feels like it's the best wife he ever had.
All right,
there you go.
It's sort of kind of a testimonial. You may have wives that are a little disappointed in that comparison. So how can, if people want to find out more about what you're doing, what Indiegogo is doing, how can they find you online?
The best way is you can find Indiegogo online, of course, at Indiegogo.com. It's INDIE, like indie, like an indie film, let's say, Indiegogo.com. That's the best place for people to see some of the latest and most exciting projects on Indiegogo. And then people can find me on Twitter at DavidMann, DavidMann.
Great, David, thanks so much for doing this.
Okay, Dan, my pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
That's Fast Forward for today. As always, you can find back episodes of this show on PCMag.com. Stay with us. We'll have a brand new show very, very shortly. I'll see you in the future.